Hello, buddy. Welcome back to the Tin Man's Corner channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'm reading another chapter out of one of my ghost books called Ghost of the Southern Mountains in Appalachia. Hence why I got you guys set in night vision mode right now, because I figured night vision gives a little bit more of a spooky vibe, if you know what I mean. But anyway, the ghost story that I'll be reading out of here is called The Letter, and it takes place in South Mountain, Maryland. James Ramsey stood in the fading sunlight. He was surrounded by the bodies of the Confederate dead, and who knows, perhaps their spirits. The Battle of South Mountain was over, for the Confederates had come out of a thin line of woods scarcely 2 hours before, helpless and with empty muskets. His own New York regiment, taking cruel advantage of the situation, had shot them down as they stood there not 20 feet away. Yeah, that is just cruel. Me personally, I would be like offering orders and medical help for whoever agrees to surrender. Most of the dead Confederates were from the coastal district of North Carolina. They wore butternut uniforms, the color ranging all the way from deep coffee brown to the whitest brown of ordinary dust. He looked down into the poor pitched faces worn with marching and scat fare, and his anger toward them died. There was no succession in those rigid forms, nor in those fixed eyes staring blankly at the sky. It was not their war anymore. Some of the Union soldiers were taking the finer powder from the cartridge boxes of the dead and priming their muskets with it. Except for that, each body lay untouched as it had fallen. Darkness came on quickly before there was time to bury the dead. Ramsey and his comrades unrolled the blankets of the rebels and went about covering each body. The air was full of the fragrance of pennyroyal, and her bruised by the tramping of 100 feet, and he would always remember it as part of this day. It was Sunday, September 14th, 1862, but the air was chilly, and after munching on some of their cooked rations and listening to the fire, which continued until about 9 o'clock that evening, the men drew their blankets over them and went to sleep. It was a strange sight. Though Ramsey stretched out here in the narrow field lay living Yankee and dead Confederate side by side, nor could one be told from the other. If they were going to do that, I would at least try to attempt start digging graves for them, because if you just leave them out in the cold, gases might start escaping from their bodies and they start to stink. But it's kind of weird sleeping right next to a dead person. Sometime after midnight, James Ramsey awoke very thirsty. He reached for his water flask to find it empty, and then he recalled that he had forgotten to fill it at the stream. He must have said this out loud to himself, for the figure next to him rose on one elbow and extended his own water flask. Ramsey drank from it gratefully, thanked him, and was about to lie back upon his arms when a voice said, "I have a letter in my breast pocket. Would you see that it gets to my wife?" "Of course," replied Ramsey, and exhausted, he fell asleep once more. Well, they got a full black and white photo of a cannon right next to a bunch of flowers in the field. He awoke at daylight, as he had for so many dawns during the past few months, and began to recall where he was and what had happened the day before. While he waited for the rest of the camp to stir, then he remembered his buddy next to him who had given him a drink during the night. What was it the man had said? He had asked him to carry a letter to his wife. That was it. Poor fellow. Like all of them, he knew that each day might so easily be his last. Ramsey glanced over at him curiously to see who it was. Then he realized that the man on his right was not from his own regiment, but was one of the dead Confederates they had not had time to bury the night before. It must be the fellow asleep on the other side then. He turned. This too was a dead Confederate, nor was there any water flask on the body. Woo! And if I was a Union soldier and I found out that it was a dead Confederate guy asking me to give a letter to his wife, I'll be freaking out a little bit, but I'll see if that letter gets to her. But that would be spooky. I'll be jumping out of my boots. He could not believe his eyes. He was certain it had been no dream, for he clearly remembered the man rising up to give him water. One thing would tell him. He peeled the blanket back from the Confederate and reached into his breast pocket. In it was a letter addressed to Mrs. John Carpenter. Hey, that's the guy that directed Halloween 1. They're probably not related, but anyway, what a coincidence, right? He opened it and began to read, "My dearest wife, I think of you daily, and in the event I am not able to return to tell you, I want you to know that." Ramsey read no further. He was not a superstitious man, but he knew that his experience was too real to discount. He would never forget the night he had met the spirit of a Confederate soldier named John Carpenter as they slept side by side in a field in Maryland. And they got a picture of the soldier right here, maybe a Confederate one. Whew. That is crazy, because you would think that when you're sleeping, it might have been one of your comrades that's awake or whatever to hand you a flask, but then all of a sudden you realize it's a spirit of one of the dead Confederates. Like I said, I'll not only be jumping out of my boots, but my skin will be just crawling all over the place, because you know that guy is deceased and you didn't bury him yet. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this little book reading segment of The Ghost of the Southern Mountains of Appalachia by Nancy Roberts. And let me know down in the comments if you ever heard about this story, if you've been to Maryland. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more book reading content like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man's Corner channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor. I say that's a wrap, and have a nice day, buddy.